Good evening. It is time for our Tuesday night read aloud. As you can see, I have decided to actually be the character from this week's story. And this week's story is called A Bad Case of Stripes. As you can see, I have a bad case of stripes, just like Camilla. Okay. So, as always, as we are waiting on a few more people to join, we're going to talk about some ideas of things that you can do with this book. Okay. So, I know kids love pizza. I personally can't eat it. Wish I could because everybody tells me how delicious it is, but I can't. So, you can do this one or two ways. If you're a parent at home and you guys have been to eat pizza, you can clean the box out and they can create what I would call like a pizza box book report. So they can draw the main character. That can be their cover for the top of the box. And of course, they will put the name of the book and the author, who's also the illustrator, on the book. And now in this case, I as a classroom teacher, I've done this before, and so I've ordered these little boxes to use. And then you can have them cut out little triangles, glue them to some brown construction paper in the shape of pizza slices. And then they can do a slice for like the character, the setting, and then they will put it together inside the box. I didn't put it all the way together, but they would put it together in the shape of a pizza. Then up here they could do a review of the book. They could decorate these slices. They could write the information, and then they could also decorate the slices. If you just want it to be an art project, they could literally draw. And some of you might say, well, I'm not a great artist. You don't have to be, because I am clearly not an art teacher. What I found with most of my kids, they told me this actually did work for them when I've done this book in the past, is that we started with like the outline of the hair. So her hair is kind of curly. So we do it like that. And how we create the bow for her hair is real simple. It's like drawing two little hearts. And then you make that little oval shape, or however you want to make it in the middle. And you then go on the other side and draw two little hearts, and there's your bow. And then we just continue her hair like that. And then we go around and close it in on the other side. And then we give her a face, and we draw in the eyes, eyebrows, the nose, and her lips. And if they do it on notebook paper, the lines are already there, and they can just go over them with whatever color pencil and color in between and color her hair. Or if you want to turn, boys read this book as well. So you can do it where the hair is kind of spiky, like a boy's, and just color his hair different colors and do the same thing with his face. So you can do lots of different things with it. So we have the pizza box book report. We have just the straight art. And of course, as usual, right before we end, I'll give you some questions that you could ask just to check to make sure they really understood the book and the lessons that they were supposed to learn from the book. So, just different things to do. Now, here's what I'm going to do for either you can be a teacher or it can be a parent who really wants to do this with their kid, but it's, I've thrown away all my pizza boxes, or we're not having pizza anytime soon. I actually have a little stockpile of these boxes. So I will, if you send me a message in Messenger for my viewers viewing tonight, it's live with me. The first 5 viewers viewing tonight, if you actually want to try this with your kid or just practice working on one and having a display ready, you want to use it in your classroom, if you send me your address, I will mail you one of these boxes so that you can actually do this. Okay? So now let's get started with our story. A Bad Case of Stripes by David Shannon. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today was um Today she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none of them seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror, and then she screamed. So there she is in her closet. Can you imagine trying on 42 outfits? Now we know why she screamed. Poor baby. Poor baby. So mama's got her with the thermometer, and I mean she's covered. So she is striped from head to toe. So let's see what's going on. Her mother ran into the room and she screamed too. Oh my heavens, she cried. You're completely covered with stripes. This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow, kind of like this. Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead. Do you feel all right? She asked. I feel fine, Camilla answered. But just look at me. You get back into bed this instant, her mother ordered. You're not going to school today. Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what other kids would say. And she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. I mean, the person who tried on 42 outfits, she certainly isn't going to know what to do with this. Oh, goodness. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla. Most extraordinary, he exclaimed. I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, running nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching? No, Camilla told him. I feel fine. Well, then, Dr. Bumblebee said, turning to Mrs. Cream, I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me. And off he went. So look, even her tongue is striped. Woo, too much. Uh-oh. Now it gets bad. So of course, Camilla goes to school. Look at this. Look how the kids are looking at her. So you can imagine what they're listening to, considering she's now red, white, and blue. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crayon and Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal. But when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. As you can see, it gets worse. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camilla turned purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard," and a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out all different shapes and colors, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you can change channels on a TV. And so you can see she's got the polka dots, the stripes, she's got some camouflage. The kids are having a ball. And then she goes home. Now, those are her parents. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream," he said. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home from school. She's just too much of a distraction. And I've been getting calls from all the other parents. They're afraid those stripes may be contagious." Camilla was so embarrassed she couldn't believe that 2 days ago everyone liked her. Now nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camilla. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. So she wants some lima beans, but she's like, "No, I've been through enough for one day." What's going on here? Hmm. Well, yes, I see. Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day. "I think I better bring in the specialist. We'll be right over." About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with four people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. "This is Dr. Grop, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young." Then the specialist went to work on Camilla. They squeezed and jabbed and tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Grope, "or the measles," said Dr. Sponge. "Definitely not chicken pox," put in Dr. Cricket. "Or sunburn," said Dr. Young. "Try these," said the specialist. Each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. "Take one of each before bed," said Dr. Grope. Then they filed out of the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. So they are poking and prodding, and they could tell her everything that it wasn't, but they couldn't tell her what it was. What do you think she looks like after she takes all of these pills? Let's see. She looks like a pill. That night, Camilla took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different, but when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant, multicolored pill with her face on it. So she took the pills, and now she looks like a pill. What do you think they're going to do to the poor child next? Let's see why this happened. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called, but this time, instead of the specialist, he brought the experts. Dr. Gord and Mr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camilla was poked and prodded, looked at and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gord finally spoke. "It might be a virus," he announced with authority. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Camilla. "Or possibly some form of bacteria," said Mr. Mellon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. "Or it could be a fungus," added Dr. Gord. Instantly, Camilla was covered with different color fungus blotches. The experts looked at Camilla, then at each other. "We need to go over these numbers again back at the lab," Dr. Gord explained. "We'll call you when we know something." But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. So all they did was come in and make it worse. By now, the TV news had found out about Camilla. Reporters from every channel were outside her house, telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon, a huge crowd was camped on the front lawn. So now everybody's heard about it. The news crew is out. Everybody's out trying to get a peek at this kid. This is what the poor child looks like now. Can you imagine? The creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail, but nothing worked. Poor baby, poor baby. What happened here? One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camilla. Close your eyes, she said. Breathe deep and become one with your room. I wish you hadn't said that, Camilla groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into her walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth. Her nose was a dresser, and two paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. What are we going to do? Cried Mrs. Cream. It just keeps getting worse and worse. She began to sob. So this person comes in, and now the child has turned into her bedroom. She's morphed into the walls. Oh, look at the dear, sweet little granny. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and as sweet as a strawberry. Excuse me, she said brightly, but I think I can help. Now, what do you think Grandma can do? If everybody else has made the mess even bigger, I mean, she looks sweet, but do you really think she can solve the problem? So, of course, Camilla is still her room. She went into Camilla's room and looked around. My goodness, she said with a shake of her head. What have we here? It's a bad case of stripes, one of the worst I've ever seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, she said, these might do the trick. Are those magic beans? Asked Mrs. Cream. Oh my, no, replied the kind old woman. There's no such thing. They're just plain old lima beans. I bet you like some, wouldn't you? She asked Camilla. Camilla wanted a big heaping plate full of lima beans, more than just about anything, but she was still afraid to admit it. Yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans, especially me. Oh dear, the old woman said sadly. I guess I was wrong about you. She put the beans back in her bag and started toward the door. Camilla watched the old woman, walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she'd been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. Wait, she cried. The truth is, I really love lima beans. I thought so, the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. Mmm, said Camilla. So there's Granny popping the lima beans into her mouth. And look, suddenly the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. The whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla, and everything was back to normal. I'm cured, she shouted. Yes, said the old woman. I knew the real you was in there somewhere. She patted Camilla on the head, and then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Afterward, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had a touch of stripes again. So not only stripes she has, it's in her hair bow. So we could all take a lesson from Camilla because she really liked lima beans, but she just wouldn't eat them. All right. So remember the craft. Remember, if you want me to send you a pizza box and some instructions, if you will message me in my messenger, I will gladly send you one so you can either try it with your class or do it at home with your kids. Also, here's again some questions that you could go over with your student or your child at home. How does Camilla feel at the beginning of the story? How does she feel at the end of the story? So what changes from the beginning? You can discuss even the things that happen in the middle and how is she different in the end. And take this beyond just how she's physically different. What important lesson does Camilla learn by the end of the story? How can you apply that lesson to your life? Why is Camilla so afraid to admit she likes lima beans? How do you think Camilla feels throughout the story? And how would you feel if you were in her shoes? So we talk about specifically the beginning, the end, but throughout the story, what emotions do you think that she's going through? And then imagine yourself in her shoes. How would you feel if you woke up like this one morning? And finally, Camilla pretends to dislike lima beans. What foods do you dislike and why? Okay, that is the end of our story time for the night. I will see you again on Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock. And who knows what character you will find. Until then, see you next time.